the face that conquered history. Imagine standing face to face with the most famous woman in history, not the Cleopatra of Hollywood, not the Cleopatra painted by Renaissance artists, not the Cleopatra portrayed by actresses draped in gold and jewels, the real Cleopatra, the woman who lived more than 2,000 years ago. Would you recognize her, or would you walk past her without a second glance? For centuries, the world has been obsessed with Cleopatra's face. Artists imagined it, emperors feared it, writers romanticized it, filmmakers transformed it into one of the most recognizable images in history. Yet there is a problem. Nobody knows exactly what Cleopatra looked like. The woman remembered as the ultimate symbol of beauty may never have matched the image that survives today. Hidden in museums, buried beneath centuries of myth, preserved on worn silver coins and broken marble statues, fragments of evidence tell a different story. A story not about beauty, but about power. A story not about seduction, but about survival. Tonight, we begin a journey through ancient Egypt, across the Mediterranean world, and into the heart of one of history's greatest mysteries. What did Cleopatra really look like? And why has the world spent 2,000 years getting her face wrong? The shadow of a legend. Long before modern celebrities dominated magazines and screens, there was Cleopatra. Her name became immortal. School children learn it. Tourists search for it. Historians debate it. Even people who know little about ancient Egypt recognize the name Cleopatra. Yet this global fame creates a strange illusion. The more famous Cleopatra became, the less certain people became about who she actually was. The popular image is familiar. A beautiful queen, dark eyeliner, golden crown, flowing black hair, perfect features. A woman whose beauty supposedly changed the course of history. But history is rarely that simple. The real Cleopatra lived during one of the most dangerous periods in the ancient world. Empires were collapsing. Armies marched across continents. Civil wars consumed entire nations. Political assassinations were common. Trust was a luxury few rulers could afford. Into this world stepped a young queen determined to survive. And survival demanded much more than beauty. It demanded intelligence, courage, calculation, and a mind capable of competing with the greatest political leaders of her age. A city of miracles. To understand Cleopatra, we must first understand her city. Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BC. Alexandria was unlike any city on Earth. Its harbor was crowded with ships from every corner of the Mediterranean. Merchants arrived carrying spices, ivory, silk, gold, and rare animals. Scholars gathered from distant lands. Philosophers debated in public squares. Engineers designed inventions that seemed almost magical. Towering above everything stood one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Great Lighthouse of Alexandria. At night, its flame could be seen for miles across the sea. For sailors, it represented safety. For enemies, it represented power. For visitors, it represented the wealth and ambition of Egypt's rulers. Nearby stood another wonder, the Library of Alexandria. Thousands upon thousands of scrolls filled its halls. Knowledge from Greece, Egypt, Persia, India, and beyond was collected there. Many historians believe it contained the greatest collection of knowledge the ancient world had ever assembled. This was the city into which Cleopatra was born. Not a land of mystery and pyramids alone, but a sophisticated center of science, politics, commerce, and culture. She grew up surrounded by ideas, surrounded by power, surrounded by ambition. And from an early age, she learned that ruling Egypt meant mastering all 3, the blood of kings. Cleopatra belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty. The dynasty traced its origins to one of Alexander the Great's generals. After Alexander's death, his empire fractured. His commanders fought to control the territories he conquered. One of them, Ptolemy, seized Egypt. From that moment forward, the Ptolemies ruled the Nile. Yet there was something unusual about them. Although they ruled Egypt, they were not Egyptian. They were Greek. They spoke Greek. They embraced Greek customs. They often married within their own family to preserve royal bloodlines. Generation after generation continued this practice. The result was a dynasty both powerful and fragile. Powerful because it maintained control. Fragile because internal rivalries became increasingly dangerous. Brothers fought sisters. Sisters fought brothers. Assassinations became common. Poison became a political weapon. Trust became almost impossible. Cleopatra was born into this environment. A royal family where love and loyalty often mattered less than survival. And survival would soon become the defining challenge of her life. Chapter 2. The Evidence of Stone and Silver. The Search for a Lost Face. Imagine trying to identify a person after 2,000 years. No photographs exist. No paintings created from life survive. No written description provides exact details. Only fragments remain. A broken statue, a damaged coin, a few comments from ancient writers. Yet these fragments may hold the key to solving one of history's greatest mysteries. What did Cleopatra actually look like? Historians searching for answers begin with the most important evidence of all: coins. Unlike statues created decades later, coins were produced during Cleopatra's lifetime. They served as official representations, approved by the queen herself. Every detail mattered. Every feature conveyed a message. Every portrait was political. When archaeologists examine surviving examples, they discover something surprising. The face does not resemble Hollywood's Cleopatra. The nose appears prominent. The jawline appears strong. The chin projects forward with confidence. The expression is serious, determined, almost severe. This is not the face of a woman attempting to appear delicate. It is the face of a ruler communicating authority, a monarch who understood that appearances influenced power. The language of power. Modern viewers often make a mistake. They assume ancient portraits were designed primarily to capture beauty. But rulers of the ancient world had different priorities. Their portraits communicated legitimacy, strength, authority, divine favor. The portrait on a coin was essentially political advertising. When subjects handled currency, they encountered the ruler's image. That image reinforced power. It reminded citizens who controlled the kingdom. It projected confidence. For Cleopatra, this was especially important. She ruled in a male-dominated world. Many rivals questioned her authority simply because she was a woman. To survive, she needed to appear strong, capable, commanding. The features seen on her coins may therefore reveal not only her appearance but also her political strategy. The coins speak. As scholars compare multiple surviving coins, patterns emerge. Again and again, certain features repeat. The nose, the jawline, the forehead, the hairstyle. These consistencies suggest the portraits were based on recognizable characteristics rather than pure imagination. The Cleopatra, emerging from the evidence, looks intelligent, confident, royal, but not necessarily conventionally beautiful according to modern standards. And this realization forces historians to ask a deeper question. If Cleopatra's appearance differed from the popular image, why did later generations transform her into history's ultimate beauty? The answer lies not in Egypt, but in Rome. Chapter 3. Beauty, Propaganda, and the War for Her Image. The most powerful lie in history. There are moments in history when a lie becomes stronger than the truth. Not because the lie is believable, not because the lie is supported by evidence, but because the lie is repeated so many times that eventually people stop questioning it. For more than 2,000 years, one particular story has followed Cleopatra. It is the story that transformed her from a ruler into a seductress, from a strategist into a temptress, from a queen into a fantasy. According to this story, Cleopatra possessed such extraordinary beauty that the greatest men of her age could not resist her. She enchanted Julius Caesar. She bewitched Mark Antony. She brought powerful Roman leaders to their knees. She used beauty as a weapon, seduction as a strategy, desire as a tool of conquest. The story is dramatic. It is entertaining. It is memorable. And it may be one of the greatest distortions in all of ancient history. Because when historians begin examining the evidence, the legend starts to crumble. The surviving coins do not show an impossibly beautiful woman. The surviving statues do not reveal a flawless face. Ancient writers, who actually met people who knew Cleopatra, rarely focus on physical beauty. Instead, they repeatedly mention something else: her intelligence, her education, her charisma, her voice, her ability to make people listen. And that difference changes everything. If Cleopatra did not conquer Rome with beauty alone, then how did she become one of the most powerful women who ever lived? The answer begins with a meeting that changed history. A meeting with a Roman general named Julius Caesar, Egypt, on the edge of collapse. By the year 48 BC, Egypt was in crisis. The kingdom was wealthy. Its grain fed millions. Its treasury overflowed with resources. Its ports connected trade routes stretching across continents. Yet, beneath this prosperity lay instability. The Ptolemaic dynasty was tearing itself apart. Cleopatra had inherited the throne alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. Officially, they ruled together. In reality, they were rivals. Court advisors manipulated the young king. Political factions competed for influence. The royal palace became a battlefield disguised as a government. Eventually, the conflict exploded. Cleopatra found herself pushed out of power, forced into exile, separated from the capital she hoped to rule. Many leaders would have accepted defeat. Many would have fled. Many would have disappeared into history. But Cleopatra was not most leaders. She began planning her return. At precisely the moment another crisis was unfolding across the Mediterranean, a Roman civil war. The arrival of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was already becoming a legend, victorious in countless campaigns, brilliant on the battlefield, ruthless in politics, ambitious beyond measure. His rivalry with Pompey had plunged Rome into civil war. When Pompey fled to Egypt seeking refuge, Egyptian officials made a fatal mistake. They murdered him. They believed Caesar would reward them. Instead, Caesar was disgusted. When he arrived in Alexandria, he found himself drawn into Egypt's internal conflict. Suddenly, the fate of Cleopatra and the fate of Caesar became intertwined. The queen needed Roman support. Caesar needed stability in Egypt. Both saw opportunity. Both understood power. Both recognized intelligence in the other. And so one of history's most famous alliances began. The carpet story. Perhaps no story about Cleopatra is more famous than her dramatic introduction to Caesar. According to ancient accounts, she arranged to be secretly smuggled into the palace, wrapped inside bedding or a large carpet, carried past guards, delivered directly into Caesar's presence. The image has survived for centuries. The beautiful queen emerging dramatically before the Roman conqueror. Movies love this scene. Artists paint it. Novelists celebrate it. But the true significance of the story has little to do with beauty. Instead, it reveals something far more important: audacity, risk, strategy. Think about what Cleopatra was attempting. She was an exiled queen entering hostile territory. If discovered, she could have been arrested, possibly executed. Yet she took the risk, not because she relied on beauty, because she relied on intelligence. She understood something fundamental. Access creates opportunity, and opportunity creates power. When Caesar met Cleopatra, he did not encounter merely a beautiful woman. He encountered a political operator capable of bold, unconventional thinking, someone who understood theater, someone who understood timing, someone who understood influence. The encounter left an impression, not simply because of how she looked, but because of who she was. Was Cleopatra beautiful? This question has fascinated historians for centuries. Was Cleopatra beautiful? The honest answer may surprise many people. We do not know. At least not in the way modern audiences imagine beauty. Beauty standards change dramatically across cultures and eras. What one society celebrates, another ignores. What one century admires, another rejects. Ancient beauty was not identical to modern beauty. Greek ideals differed from Egyptian ideals. Roman ideals differed from both. Furthermore, physical appearance was only one part of attractiveness. Ancient writers often emphasized presence, voice, confidence, charm, education, conversation. These qualities could be even more important than facial features. One of the most important descriptions comes from Plutarch. Writing generations after Cleopatra's death, he explained that her beauty alone was not extraordinary enough to astonish everyone who saw her. Instead, he emphasized her personality, her conversation, her intelligence, her ability to captivate people. In other words, Cleopatra's greatest attraction may have been psychological rather than physical. She understood people. She knew how to adapt. She knew how to persuade. She knew how to make others feel important. These skills are often more powerful than appearance, and they may explain her success far better than any myth about irresistible beauty. The woman who spoke to kings. Language was one of Cleopatra's greatest weapons. Many members of her dynasty relied heavily on interpreters. Cleopatra did not. Ancient sources suggest she spoke multiple languages: Greek, Egyptian, possibly several others used throughout the Eastern Mediterranean. This ability provided enormous advantages. Diplomacy became easier. Negotiations became more personal. Alliances became stronger. Imagine a foreign ruler expecting an interpreter, and instead hearing the queen address him directly in his own language. The effect would be unforgettable. Language builds trust. Language creates connection. Language demonstrates respect. Cleopatra understood this. While others saw language as a practical skill, she recognized it as a tool of power. Every conversation became an opportunity. Every negotiation became a performance. Every interaction strengthened her position. This is the Cleopatra often overlooked by popular culture, not merely a beautiful queen, but a master communicator, a strategist, a politician, a ruler. And Rome would soon discover just how dangerous those qualities could be. Chapter 3, Part 2. Caesarion, Rome's fear of Cleopatra, and the assassination of Caesar, the son of a conqueror. The alliance between Cleopatra and Julius Caesar was more than political. It produced a child whose existence would terrify Rome. His name was Ptolemy XV, Philopator Caesar. History remembers him by a simpler name, Caesarion, Little Caesar. To Cleopatra, he was more than a son. He was the future, the continuation of her dynasty, the living connection between Egypt and the most powerful Roman alive. If Caesar formally recognized the boy as his heir, the political consequences could be enormous. Imagine a future where Egypt and Rome became linked through blood. Imagine a ruler descended from both Caesar and the Ptolemies. Many Romans found this possibility disturbing. Rome prided itself on being a republic. Kings were viewed with suspicion. Foreign monarchs were viewed with even greater suspicion. And Cleopatra represented everything many Romans feared. She was wealthy, powerful, independent, foreign. Now she had given birth to a child who carried Caesar's blood. The implications were impossible to ignore. Cleopatra in Rome. Eventually, Cleopatra traveled to Rome itself. The sight shocked many citizens. The Queen of Egypt arrived not as a prisoner, not as a defeated monarch, but as an honored guest of Julius Caesar. She stayed in a luxurious villa associated with Caesar. Her presence became impossible to ignore. Some Romans admired her intelligence. Others admired her confidence. Many resented her influence. Rumors spread through the city. Whispers filled political gatherings. Questions emerged. Was Caesar planning to make himself king? Would Cleopatra become queen beside him? Would Caesarion inherit power? The fears intensified because Caesar himself seemed increasingly powerful. He accumulated offices, expanded authority, accepted honors that alarmed traditionalists. To supporters, he appeared unstoppable. To opponents, he appeared dangerous. And standing near him was Cleopatra. For those who already feared Caesar's ambitions, Cleopatra became a convenient symbol, a foreign queen supposedly influencing Rome's greatest leader. The reality mattered less than perception, and perception was becoming increasingly hostile. The Ides of March. On March 15, 44 BC, everything changed. The day would become immortal. The Ides of March. Inside the Senate chamber, conspirators struck. Knives flashed. Voices shouted. Chaos erupted. Julius Caesar was assassinated. One of the most powerful men in history collapsed beneath repeated stab wounds. His death shocked the Roman world. News spread rapidly. Supporters mourned. Enemies celebrated. Uncertainty consumed the Republic. For Cleopatra, the consequences were immediate. Her protector was gone. Her political future suddenly became uncertain. The alliance she had carefully built disappeared in a single afternoon. And with Caesar's death, Caesarion's future became even more dangerous. Because now the question of succession threatened to ignite a struggle for control of Rome itself. Return to Egypt. Cleopatra wasted little time. She understood the danger. Rome was no longer safe. The political landscape had transformed overnight. Returning to Egypt offered security, distance, time. Back in Alexandria, she focused on consolidating power. Caesar was dead, but Egypt remained. Her kingdom remained. Her dynasty remained. And Caesarion remained. The young boy increasingly became central to her plans. In official imagery, he appeared beside her. In ceremonies, he represented continuity. In propaganda, he embodied legitimacy. Cleopatra intended for the world to recognize him as Caesar's son. Yet another ambitious Roman was rising, a young man who would soon become her greatest enemy. His name was Octavian. Chapter 3, Part 3. Mark Antony and the Eastern Empire, the new power struggle. Following Caesar's assassination, Rome descended into turmoil. Competing leaders fought for control. Among them stood Mark Antony, a brilliant commander, a charismatic politician, a loyal ally of Caesar, and a man determined to preserve his influence. At first, Antony and Octavian cooperated. Together, they pursued Caesar's assassins. Together, they defeated common enemies. But beneath the surface, rivalry simmered. Rome was too powerful for two ambitious men. Eventually, conflict would become inevitable. Meanwhile, Cleopatra watched carefully. She understood Roman politics better than many Romans. She knew alliances shifted constantly. She knew today's friend could become tomorrow's enemy. Most importantly, she knew Egypt's survival depended upon choosing the right partner. The meeting at Tarsus. The meeting between Cleopatra and Mark Antony became legendary. Ancient writers described an extraordinary arrival. A magnificent ship, purple sails, golden decorations, perfumed air drifting across the water, musicians performing, servants dressed as mythical figures. Cleopatra transformed a political meeting into a theatrical event. Everything was deliberate. Everything was calculated. Everything communicated power. This was not a helpless queen seeking protection. This was a monarch demonstrating wealth and confidence. Antony was impressed. How could he not be? Yet once again, later generations misunderstood the encounter. They focused on romance, on beauty, on seduction, but the deeper story involved politics. Both leaders needed each other. Antony required resources. Cleopatra required security. Their partnership benefited both sides. Romance may have followed, but strategy came first. Number, a new Eastern power. As Antony and Cleopatra grew closer, they began building something extraordinary. An Eastern alliance capable of rivaling Rome itself. Egypt's wealth combined with Antony's military influence. Together, they commanded enormous resources. Together, they controlled strategic territories. Together, they represented a genuine challenge to Octavian. This frightened Rome, or more accurately, it frightened Octavian. Because Antony was no longer acting solely as a Roman politician, increasingly, he appeared connected to Cleopatra's vision. Increasingly, he seemed drawn toward the east. Increasingly, he looked less Roman, and Octavian recognized an opportunity. If he could convince Romans that Antony had fallen under Cleopatra's control, he could undermine his rival. The greatest propaganda campaign of the ancient world was about to begin. Chapter 3, Part 4. Octavian's Propaganda Machine. The Invention of a Villain. Octavian understood something fundamental. Wars are won not only on battlefields, they are won in minds. Before armies march, narratives march first. Before swords clash, stories clash. And so Octavian began shaping public opinion. His challenge was complicated. Romans might resist another civil war. After years of conflict, many citizens were exhausted. But what if the war was not presented as a civil war? What if it became a war against a foreign threat? What if Cleopatra became the enemy? The strategy was brilliant. Instead of attacking Antony directly, Octavian focused attention on the Queen of Egypt. Gradually, Cleopatra transformed into Rome's official villain, not through evidence, through propaganda, the dangerous queen. Roman messages painted Cleopatra as dangerous, exotic, manipulative, corrupting. She was described as a temptress who had ensnared Antony, a foreign queen seeking domination, a threat to Roman values, a threat to Roman identity, a threat to Roman freedom. The accusations, repeated endlessly, through speeches, through poetry, through political messaging, through public ceremonies. Every repetition strengthened the narrative. Eventually, many Romans accepted it as truth. This process should feel familiar. History repeatedly demonstrates the power of propaganda. Repeat a claim often enough, and people begin believing it, even when evidence is weak, even when reality is more complicated. Cleopatra became a victim of this phenomenon, the battle for perception. The struggle between Antony and Octavian increasingly became a struggle over image. Octavian portrayed himself as Rome's defender. Antony became associated with foreign influence. Cleopatra became associated with corruption. Facts mattered less than emotions. Fear proved more persuasive than evidence. And fear became Octavian's most effective weapon. Chapter 3, Part 5. How Rome rewrote Cleopatra's image. After death comes memory. When powerful people die, a second battle begins. The battle over memory. Who controls the story? Who writes the history? Who decides what future generations believe? In Cleopatra's case, Rome won. Not only militarily, historically, Roman writers dominated surviving records. Roman perspectives shaped later understanding. Roman prejudices influenced future generations. As a result, Cleopatra gradually transformed. The ruler disappeared. The seductress remained. The strategist disappeared. The temptress remained. The politician disappeared. The beauty remained. History became simplified. A complex woman became a stereotype. And that stereotype proved remarkably durable. The loss of the real Cleopatra. Few people remember Cleopatra's economic reforms. Few remember her diplomatic achievements. Few remember her linguistic abilities. Few remember her administrative skill. Instead, they remember romance, beauty, scandal, the very qualities emphasized by Roman propaganda. In a sense, Octavian achieved victory beyond death. He helped create the version of Cleopatra that survived, not the real woman. The useful myth. Chapter 3, Part 6. Why the myth survives today. Number. Hollywood's Cleopatra. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Religions spread. Kingdoms vanished. Yet Cleopatra endured. Artists painted her. Writers imagined her. Filmmakers reinvented her. Each generation created its own version, and almost every version emphasized beauty. The image became self-reinforcing. People expected Cleopatra to be beautiful because previous depictions portrayed her that way. New portrayals followed the same pattern. The cycle continued. Eventually, the fictional Cleopatra became more famous than the historical Cleopatra, the face we want to see. Perhaps the myth survives because it satisfies something deeply human. People love stories about beauty changing history. People love stories about romance influencing empires. People love stories that seem larger than life. The reality is more complicated, and sometimes complexity is less appealing than legend. Yet the evidence continues pointing in another direction. Coins, statues, ancient accounts. Together they reveal a woman whose greatest weapon was not beauty. It was intelligence. Not appearance, but presence. Not seduction, but strategy. The road to the end. Soon Cleopatra's struggle with Octavian would reach its final chapter. Armies would move. Fleets would gather. Destiny would approach. The Battle of Actium would change the ancient world forever. The Queen of Egypt would face the greatest challenge of her life. And in the aftermath, a legend would be born. A legend so powerful that 2,000 years later, humanity is still trying to separate truth from myth. That final story awaits us in Chapter 4. Because Cleopatra's greatest battle was not for Egypt. It was for immortality. And in ways no one could have imagined, she won. Chapter 4. For nearly 20 years, Cleopatra had survived every challenge the ancient world could throw at her. She survived family betrayals. She survived exile. She survived civil war. She survived the assassination of Julius Caesar. She survived political conspiracies that would have destroyed lesser rulers. Again and again, she adapted. Again and again, she endured. From the marble halls of Alexandria to the palaces of Rome, her enemies underestimated her. They saw a woman. They saw a foreign queen. They saw an outsider. But Cleopatra understood something that many powerful men never learned. Power belongs to those who can change with circumstances. For years, that understanding kept her alive. Yet by 32 BC, the horizon was darkening. A storm was gathering across the Mediterranean, and this time, survival would not depend upon intelligence alone. This time, entire empires were preparing for war. The conflict between Mark Antony and Octavian had been inevitable for years. The alliance created after Caesar's death was collapsing. Trust had vanished. Political cooperation had become impossible. Both men wanted control of Rome. Both men believed they deserved it. Both men understood that eventually one would destroy the other. Caught in the center of this struggle stood Cleopatra. The Queen of Egypt had become more than an ally, more than a partner, more than a monarch. She had become the symbol of everything Octavian wanted Romans to fear, and now he intended to use that fear to reshape history itself. Octavian's master plan. Octavian understood public opinion better than any politician of his age. He knew that military victories alone would not secure power. He needed moral authority. He needed Romans to believe he was fighting for civilization itself. To accomplish this, he carefully crafted a narrative. According to Octavian, Antony was no longer a true Roman. He had become corrupted, influenced by foreign luxury, enchanted by an Eastern queen, controlled by Cleopatra. The accusation was devastating. Roman culture valued discipline, duty, self-control, service to the Republic. Antony was increasingly portrayed as the opposite, a man distracted by pleasure, a man seduced by wealth, a man willing to abandon Rome. And at the center of every accusation stood Cleopatra. The reality was far more complicated. Antony remained an experienced military commander. He remained politically ambitious. He continued making strategic decisions based on his own calculations. But facts mattered less than perception. Octavian understood that if Romans believed Antony had become Cleopatra's puppet, support for Antony would collapse. Gradually, that is exactly what happened. A kingdom prepares for war. In Alexandria, Cleopatra watched events unfold with growing concern. She understood Octavian's campaign. She recognized its effectiveness. Most importantly, she understood the danger. If Octavian won, Egypt's independence would almost certainly end. For generations, the Ptolemaic dynasty had ruled Egypt. The kingdom had survived foreign invasions, internal conflicts, and political crises. Now it faced perhaps its greatest threat, Rome itself. Cleopatra responded the only way she could. She prepared. Ships were constructed. Supplies were gathered. Treasuries were mobilized. Military commanders reviewed strategies. Every available resource was directed toward the coming conflict. Ancient writers often describe Cleopatra's wealth in astonishing terms: gold, silver, precious stones, luxury goods, massive agricultural revenues. Now that wealth became a weapon. Without Egypt's resources, Antony's war effort would have been severely weakened. With them, he possessed a genuine chance of victory, at least for a time. The gathering fleets. Across the Mediterranean, warships assembled, harbors filled with activity, sailors loaded supplies, soldiers sharpened weapons, commanders reviewed maps, messengers carried urgent reports. The scale of preparation was enormous. Thousands of lives would soon depend upon decisions made by a handful of leaders. For ordinary people, uncertainty grew. Merchants worried about trade routes. Families worried about loved ones. Local rulers worried about choosing the wrong side. Everyone understood that history was approaching a turning point. No one knew what the outcome would be. Cleopatra's gamble. Perhaps the most controversial decision involved Cleopatra herself. Rather than remain safely in Egypt, she chose to accompany the campaign. Historians have debated this decision for centuries. Critics argued she should have stayed in Alexandria. Supporters point out that her presence guaranteed continued financial and logistical support. Whatever the motivation, the choice carried enormous consequences. Because once Cleopatra joined Antony's forces, Octavian's propaganda became even more effective. Now he could claim that Rome's future was being decided by a foreign queen. Now he could portray the conflict as a struggle against Eastern domination. Now he could transform political rivalry into cultural warfare. And many Romans believed him. The shadow of destiny. As summer approached, tension spread throughout the Mediterranean world. Every report mattered. Every movement attracted attention. Every decision seemed significant. The fleets eventually converged near the western coast of Greece. There, near a place called Actium, history waited. Generations later, people would remember the battle. They would remember Antony. They would remember Octavian. They would remember Cleopatra. But few understood how uncertain the future appeared at that moment. Victory remained possible for either side. Defeat remained possible for either side. The ancient world balanced on a knife's edge. And somewhere among the crowded ships and anxious commanders stood Cleopatra, the woman whose face had become a legend, the woman whose intelligence had carried her through decades of crisis, the woman who now faced the greatest challenge of her life. Soon, the waters of Actium would decide the fate of kingdoms. Soon, the future of Egypt would hang in the balance. Soon, Cleopatra's world would begin to collapse. And when it did, the consequences would echo for more than 2,000 years. Chapter 4. The Fall of Cleopatra. Part 2. The Battle of Actium. The morning that changed history. On the morning of September 231 BC, the waters near Actium appeared calm. The sea stretched toward the horizon beneath a clear sky. Gentle waves rolled against the hulls of hundreds of warships. From a distance, the scene looked peaceful, but beneath that calm surface waited one of the most important confrontations in ancient history. Thousands of sailors stood ready at their stations. Thousands of soldiers prepared for combat. Commanders reviewed final instructions. Messengers moved between vessels carrying urgent orders. The fate of Egypt. The fate of Rome. The fate of Cleopatra herself. Everything now depended on what would happen over the next few hours. For weeks, Antony's forces had been trapped. Disease spread through the camps. Supplies became increasingly difficult to obtain. Morale weakened. Desertions increased. Meanwhile, Octavian's commander, the brilliant General Agrippa, had gradually tightened control over the region. Every passing day strengthened Octavian's position. Every passing day weakened Antony's. Yet Antony still possessed a formidable fleet. Many of his ships were enormous floating fortresses, massive vessels reinforced with heavy timber, powerful platforms capable of carrying soldiers, archers, and siege equipment. They were intimidating, impressive, terrifying to behold, but they were also slow. And in naval warfare, speed often matters more than size. Cleopatra's position. Not far from Antony's main battle line stood Cleopatra's squadron. 60 Egyptian ships waited behind the primary formation. Their sails were prepared. Their crews were alert. Their queen watched carefully. Historians have debated Cleopatra's role during the battle for centuries. Some ancient Roman writers accused her of cowardice. Others suggested she followed a prearranged strategy. Modern historians remain divided. The truth is difficult to determine. But one fact remains certain. What happened next changed everything. The clash of fleets. As the battle began, the sea erupted into chaos. Trumpets sounded. Orders echoed across the water. Oars struck the sea in synchronized rhythm. Warships maneuvered for position. The first collisions shook entire vessels. Wood splintered. Men shouted. Arrows darkened portions of the sky. Smoke drifted above the battlefield. For hours, the outcome remained uncertain. Neither side achieved a decisive breakthrough. Ships rammed one another. Boarding parties fought hand to hand. Commanders struggled to maintain control amid confusion. Ancient naval combat was brutal. There were no missiles striking from great distances. No modern weapons. Victory depended upon courage, discipline, and endurance. Men fought face to face, blade against blade, shield against shield. The sea itself became a battlefield, and beneath the fighting, another reality emerged. Antony's position was deteriorating, the decision that shocked the world. Then came the moment that would become one of history's greatest controversies. Cleopatra's ships suddenly moved. Sails unfurled. The Egyptian fleet turned south. Instead of remaining in battle, it broke through an opening and headed toward the open sea. Ancient observers were stunned. Was this a retreat? A planned escape? An emergency maneuver? No one knew. But Antony saw Cleopatra's fleet departing, and then he made a decision that would define his legacy forever. He followed her. Leaving much of his fleet behind, Antony boarded a faster vessel and sailed after Cleopatra. The consequences were immediate. Command structures collapsed. Confusion spread. Morale shattered. Many commanders no longer knew who was leading the battle. The remaining fleet fought on briefly before defeat became inevitable. One of the largest naval forces in the ancient world had effectively ceased to exist. The price of defeat. As Antony and Cleopatra sailed toward Egypt, they entered a world transformed. The dream of defeating Octavian had vanished. The possibility of creating an Eastern empire independent of Rome had collapsed. Years of planning, years of alliances, years of ambition, all swept away in a single afternoon. Behind them, Octavian celebrated victory. His position became stronger than ever. Across Rome, supporters rejoiced. The propaganda campaign suddenly seemed justified. The man who had claimed to defend Rome now appeared unstoppable, and the queen who had been portrayed as a threat to Roman civilization appeared defeated. Yet the final chapter had not yet been written. Because Cleopatra was still alive, Egypt still existed, and Alexandria still waited. The long voyage home. The journey back to Egypt was filled with uncertainty. Ancient sources describe Antony as devastated. The confident commander who had once dominated Roman politics struggled to comprehend what had happened. Everything he had worked toward appeared to be slipping away. Cleopatra faced her own nightmare. She understood the scale of the disaster. She understood Octavian's determination. Most importantly, she understood that Egypt now stood alone. No great fleet remained to protect it. No major Roman ally remained capable of changing events. For the first time in years, genuine defeat seemed possible. Yet even now, Cleopatra refused to surrender. Back in Alexandria, she would continue planning, continue negotiating, continue searching for solutions, until the very end. Chapter 4. The Final Days of Cleopatra. A city waiting for doom. Alexandria had witnessed greatness for centuries. Its harbor welcomed merchants from distant lands. Its palaces displayed unimaginable wealth. Its library had become legendary. Its lighthouse guided ships across the Mediterranean. Now the city waited for war. News of Actium spread quickly. Citizens understood the danger. Many feared the worst. Some prepared to flee. Others hoped diplomacy might still prevent disaster. But Cleopatra knew the truth. Octavian would come. It was only a matter of time. The Queen's last plans. In the months following Actium, Cleopatra explored every possible option. She strengthened defenses, reviewed military resources, attempted negotiations, examined escape routes. Some accounts suggest she even considered moving treasure and resources beyond Octavian's reach. Nothing was ignored. Nothing was left to chance. She had spent her entire life navigating crises. Now she faced the greatest crisis of all. Yet those closest to her noticed something remarkable. Despite the danger, Cleopatra remained composed. She continued governing, continued meeting officials, continued making decisions. The woman who had survived exile and civil war refused to panic. The decline of Mark Antony. Antony, however, struggled. Defeat at Actium haunted him. Former allies abandoned him. Military support dwindled. Confidence disappeared. The charismatic leader who had once challenged Rome's greatest figures seemed increasingly isolated. Ancient writers often portray Antony during this period as a tragic figure, a man watching his world collapse, a warrior confronting failure, a leader running out of options. Some accounts describe periods of despair. Others describe bursts of determination. Whatever the truth, the pressure was immense, and it grew worse with each passing month. Octavian advances. By 30 BC, Octavian's victory seemed inevitable. His armies advanced steadily. Cities surrendered. Opposition weakened. Resistance crumbled. Every report reaching Alexandria carried bad news. Every messenger seemed to confirm the same reality. Rome was coming, and Rome intended to win. When Octavian entered Egypt, the final confrontation began. There would be no miracle, no unexpected rescue, no sudden reversal of fortune. The end approached. The last battle. Antony made one final attempt to resist. For a brief moment, success even seemed possible. Some skirmishes favored his forces. Hope flickered. Then reality returned. Octavian's military machine was simply too powerful. Years of conflict had exhausted Antony's resources. His army weakened. His support network collapsed. His options vanished. The final defeat arrived swiftly. The false report. Then came one of the most tragic moments in ancient history. According to traditional accounts, Antony received shocking news. He was told Cleopatra was dead. Believing the report, he fell into despair. The woman who had shared his triumphs and failures. The queen who had stood beside him for years. Gone. Unable to endure the loss, Antony attempted suicide. The attempt failed immediately. Mortally wounded, but still alive, he suffered terribly. Then the truth emerged. Cleopatra was not dead. She had taken refuge inside her mausoleum. When Antony learned this, he requested to see her one final time. The final meeting. The scene became legendary. Servants carried the dying Antony to Cleopatra's refuge. Ancient accounts describe extraordinary emotion. A fallen commander, a defeated queen. Two lives shaped by ambition, love, power, and war, now facing the end together. Antony died in Cleopatra's arms. The man who had once commanded vast armies. The man who had challenged Octavian for control of the Roman world. Gone. For Cleopatra, the loss was devastating. But she had little time to grieve. Octavian was approaching, and her own fate remained uncertain. Octavian and Cleopatra. Soon after Antony's death, Cleopatra found herself confronting the man who had destroyed her world. Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, the future master of Rome. Their meeting represented the end of an era, one ruler ascending, another falling. Cleopatra attempted negotiation. She hoped to preserve her children's future, perhaps even preserve some measure of dignity, but she understood the danger. If transported to Rome, she would likely appear in Octavian's triumphal parade, displayed before crowds as a defeated enemy, humiliated before the world. For Cleopatra, this outcome was unacceptable. The Queen of Egypt had spent her life protecting her authority, protecting her image, protecting her legacy. She would not allow herself to become a trophy, and so she began considering another path, a path that would make her immortal, a path that would ensure historians debated her final hours for more than 2,000 years. The path toward one of history's most famous deaths. Chapter 4, Part 4, The Death of a Queen, The Lost Tomb, and Cleopatra's True Face. The Last Days of the Last Pharaoh. The summer of 30 BC was coming to an end. For Cleopatra, every sunrise brought fewer options. The kingdom she had fought her entire life to protect was gone. The fleet that once ruled the eastern Mediterranean lay destroyed. The armies that once defended Egypt had surrendered or vanished. Mark Antony was dead. Alexandria had fallen, and outside her palace stood the soldiers of Rome. For nearly 3 centuries, the Ptolemaic dynasty had ruled Egypt. Generation after generation had sat upon the throne, founded by the successors of Alexander the Great. Now that dynasty stood on the edge of extinction. Cleopatra understood what many rulers never do. She understood when the game was over. Yet, even in defeat, she remained dangerous, because she still possessed something Octavian desperately wanted: her surrender, her humiliation, her public submission. Octavian intended to display Cleopatra in Rome. The spectacle would be magnificent. Crowds would fill the streets. Citizens would celebrate victory. The Queen of Egypt would march in chains before the people. The woman who had challenged Rome would become proof of Rome's supremacy. For Octavian, it would be the ultimate political triumph. For Cleopatra, it would be unbearable. She had spent her life as a queen. She would not live as a prisoner. The final negotiations. Ancient writers describe a tense series of meetings and messages between Cleopatra and Octavian. The queen hoped to secure a future for her children. Octavian hoped to secure her cooperation. Neither fully trusted the other. Both understood the stakes. Cleopatra was intelligent enough to recognize the danger. She knew Roman history. She knew how conquered rulers were treated. She knew what awaited those who became symbols of victory. Again and again, she tested Octavian's intentions. Again and again, she searched for alternatives. Some ancient accounts suggest she explored methods of suicide. Others claim she conducted experiments attempting to determine which poisons caused the least suffering. The stories may be exaggerated. Roman authors often enjoyed dramatic details, yet they reveal an important truth. Cleopatra was thinking about death, not because she feared dying, because she feared living under Roman control. The queen's mausoleum. Near the end, Cleopatra withdrew to a mausoleum she had prepared. It was both a tomb and a fortress, filled with treasures, filled with valuables, filled with symbols of royal power. Some historians believe she intended to destroy these riches rather than allow them to fall into Roman hands. Others believe she sought refuge while deciding her final course of action. Whatever her intentions, the mausoleum became the setting for one of history's greatest mysteries, the mystery of Cleopatra's death. The most famous version of the story is known around the world. According to ancient tradition, Cleopatra arranged for an Egyptian cobra, an asp, to be smuggled into her chamber. The snake bit her. Its venom killed her, and thus the Queen of Egypt died. The image is unforgettable. A royal queen, a sacred Egyptian serpent, a final act of defiance. Artists loved it. Writers celebrated it. Filmmakers embraced it. For centuries, the asp became inseparable from Cleopatra's story. Yet modern historians are not entirely convinced. There are problems with the tale. Cobras are large animals. Concealing one would be difficult. Their bites do not always cause immediate death. Symptoms can vary significantly. Ancient accounts disagree on important details. Some mention a snake. Others mention poison. Some suggest hidden toxins carried in a hairpin or ointment. The truth remains uncertain. What matters is that Cleopatra died. How she died may never be known with certainty. The final hours. Imagine the scene. Outside, Roman soldiers controlled Alexandria. Inside, Cleopatra prepared for the end. The woman who once spoke with Caesar. The woman who negotiated with kings. The woman who commanded immense wealth and influence. Now sat alone with history. Did she think about her childhood? Did she remember the halls of Alexandria? Did she think of Antony? Of Caesar? Of her children? No source can answer these questions. The silence of those final hours remains unbroken. But one thing seems clear. Cleopatra chose her own ending. Rome could conquer her kingdom. Rome could seize her treasures. Rome could erase her dynasty. But Rome would not decide how her story ended. That decision belonged to her. Octavian's discovery. When Octavian's men entered her chambers, Cleopatra was dead. Beside her were two loyal attendants. Ancient sources identify them as Eros and Charmion. Both were also dying or already dead. The scene astonished everyone present. Octavian had achieved victory, yet he had lost the prize he wanted most. He would never parade Cleopatra through Rome. He would never display her humiliation before cheering crowds. The queen had denied him that satisfaction. Even in death, she remained beyond his control. It was her final political act, and perhaps her most successful one. Because more than 2,000 years later, people remember Cleopatra. Few remember the names of those who captured her. The fate of Caesarion. Yet another tragedy remained. Caesarion. The son Cleopatra claimed was fathered by Julius Caesar. The boy represented danger. As long as he lived, some could argue he possessed a stronger claim to Caesar's legacy than Octavian himself. That possibility could not be tolerated. Ancient writers record a chilling phrase attributed to advisors around Octavian. Too many Caesars is not a good thing. Soon afterward, Caesarion disappeared from history. Most historians believe he was executed. He was perhaps 17 years old. With his death, the direct line of Cleopatra's dynasty effectively ended. The dream of an independent Egypt ruled by the Ptolemies died with him. The kingdom became a Roman province. The age of the pharaohs was over. The last pharaoh. Cleopatra is often called the last pharaoh. The title is symbolic, yet it captures something important. For thousands of years, Egypt had been ruled by kings and queens. Dynasties rose and fell. Empires invaded and retreated. Civilizations changed. But Egypt remained Egypt. After Cleopatra's death, that continuity ended. Never again would an independent pharaoh rule from the banks of the Nile. Never again would Egypt stand as a sovereign kingdom under native royal authority. A chapter of human history stretching back thousands of years, closed forever. And Cleopatra was the final page, the lost tomb of Cleopatra. Most famous rulers leave behind grand monuments, pyramids, temples, palaces, massive tombs. Yet Cleopatra presents a strange mystery. Her tomb has never been found. Somewhere, perhaps beneath modern Alexandria, perhaps beneath the Mediterranean Sea, perhaps hidden within an undiscovered burial complex. The queen rests in a location unknown to history. Ancient sources suggest Cleopatra and Antony were buried together. Octavian himself reportedly allowed this. If true, their tomb became one of the most important lost sites in archaeology. For centuries, people searched. For centuries, people failed. The mystery endured. A city beneath the sea. Part of the challenge lies beneath the waters of Alexandria. Earthquakes struck the region. Sections of the ancient city collapsed. Entire districts sank beneath the Mediterranean. Royal palaces vanished. Temples disappeared. Harbors transformed. Modern underwater archaeology has revealed astonishing discoveries. Columns, statues, monuments, artifacts from Cleopatra's world. Divers exploring submerged ruins often describe the experience as entering another time. Beneath the waves lie fragments of a lost civilization. Yet the queen's tomb remains elusive, waiting, hidden, silent. Modern searches. In recent decades, archaeologists renewed efforts to locate Cleopatra's burial place. One location attracts particular attention: the temple complex known as Taposiris Magna. Located west of Alexandria, the site has produced intriguing discoveries. Tunnels, burials, artifacts connected to the Ptolemaic era. Some researchers believe the tomb may be hidden there. Others remain skeptical. The debate continues. Each excavation generates excitement. Each discovery raises new questions. And each unanswered question fuels the legend, because mysteries survive where certainty ends. What did Cleopatra really look like? And so we return to the question that began this journey. What did Cleopatra actually look like? Not the Hollywood version, not the romantic fantasy, the real woman. The evidence is limited. Coins provide the strongest clues. Statues offer additional hints. Ancient descriptions fill some gaps. Together, they paint a picture very different from popular imagination. Cleopatra likely possessed a prominent nose, a strong jawline, intense eyes, distinctive facial features inherited from generations of Ptolemaic rulers. She probably did not resemble the flawless beauty depicted in modern films, yet focusing only on physical appearance misses the point entirely, because every surviving source points towards something far more remarkable: her intelligence, her education, her charisma, her voice, her presence. Again and again, ancient writers emphasize these qualities. Again and again, they describe a woman capable of commanding attention, not because she was the most beautiful person in a room, because she was the most fascinating, the woman behind the myth. The greatest irony in Cleopatra's story is simple. History remembers her beauty, but her real power came from her mind. She mastered languages, navigated political crises, negotiated with the most powerful men on earth, ruled one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the ancient world, survived dangers that would have destroyed most rulers. These achievements required intelligence, not merely attractiveness. The myth of Cleopatra as a seductress oversimplifies her life. The reality is far more impressive. She was a stateswoman, a strategist, a monarch, a survivor. Number, the immortal queen. Empires have vanished. Palaces have crumbled. Kingdoms have disappeared. Yet Cleopatra remains. Her face still appears in books. Her story still inspires films. Her name still captures imaginations. Perhaps that is her greatest victory. Octavian won the war. Rome conquered Egypt. The dynasty ended. But Cleopatra achieved something rare. She became immortal, not physically, historically. More than 2,000 years after her death, the world still asks questions about her, still debates her appearance, still searches for her tomb, still wonders who she truly was. And perhaps that is fitting, because Cleopatra spent her life shaping perception, creating narratives, influencing how others saw her. Even now, she continues to do the same. On a quiet evening along the Mediterranean coast, the waves still wash against Alexandria's shores. Beneath those waters lie ruins, fragments of palaces, fragments of temples, fragments of a vanished world. Somewhere among those lost stones may rest the final secrets of Cleopatra, the queen whose face became a legend, the ruler whose life became a myth, the woman who challenged Rome itself. And although we may never discover every answer, the evidence reveals one truth with remarkable clarity. Cleopatra was never merely a beautiful queen. She was one of the most extraordinary political minds of the ancient world. And that is why history remembers her. Not because of the face she possessed, but because of the legacy she left behind, the woman history never forgot. As the final light fades over Alexandria and the Mediterranean waves continue their endless journey toward distant shores, one question remains. Why Cleopatra? Why, among thousands of kings, queens, emperors, generals, and rulers, does her name still survive? History is filled with powerful people who were once famous, men who commanded armies of hundreds of thousands, kings who built enormous palaces, emperors who ruled continents. Many of them have been forgotten. Their names survive only in dusty records read by specialists and historians. Yet Cleopatra endures. More than 2,000 years after her death, she remains one of the most recognizable figures in human history. Children learn her name in school. Filmmakers recreate her life. Writers imagine her thoughts. Artists paint her face. Archaeologists search for her tomb. And millions of people continue asking the same question. Who was Cleopatra? The answer is far more complicated than the legend. For centuries, Cleopatra was trapped between two extremes. To some, she became the ultimate seductress, a woman whose beauty conquered the most powerful men in the ancient world. To others, she became a villain, a dangerous foreign queen who threatened Rome itself. Neither image tells the complete story. The real Cleopatra existed somewhere between myth and reality. She was neither goddess nor monster, neither saint nor villain. She was a human being navigating one of the most dangerous political environments in history. She inherited a kingdom under pressure. She ruled during the collapse of a republic. She confronted leaders whose ambitions reshaped the ancient world. And despite overwhelming challenges, she remained a major force in international politics for nearly 2 decades. That achievement alone deserves recognition. Too often, history reduces extraordinary women to romance. Male rulers are remembered for battles, strategies, conquests, political achievements. Women are frequently remembered for relationships, beauty, scandal. Cleopatra suffered from this pattern more than almost anyone. For generations, discussions about Cleopatra focused on whom she loved rather than how she ruled. Yet if we examine the evidence honestly, a different picture emerges. We find a woman fluent in multiple languages, a ruler capable of negotiating with foreign powers, a monarch who understood economics, diplomacy, propaganda, and public image, a queen who managed one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the Mediterranean. These are not the accomplishments of someone who relied solely on beauty. They are the accomplishments of an intelligent and capable leader. Perhaps that is why Cleopatra remains so fascinating. The deeper we look, the more complex she becomes. Every answer leads to another question. Every discovery reveals another mystery. Her tomb remains hidden. Her appearance remains debated. Her final thoughts remain unknown. History rarely provides perfect certainty. Sometimes all we possess are fragments. A coin, a statue, a written description, a ruined temple, a forgotten inscription. From these fragments, we attempt to reconstruct a life. And in Cleopatra's case, the fragments tell a remarkable story. They reveal a woman who refused to accept limitations, a woman who challenged expectations, a woman who stood against forces much larger than herself. Even in defeat, she retained agency. Even in defeat, she influenced how future generations would remember her. When Cleopatra chose death over humiliation, she transformed herself into something larger than a defeated monarch. She became a symbol of resistance, a symbol of independence, a symbol of determination. That symbolism survived long after her kingdom vanished. The Egypt Cleopatra knew disappeared. The palaces crumbled. The dynasty ended. The world changed. Yet her story endured. And perhaps there is another reason we continue returning to Cleopatra. She represents one of humanity's oldest struggles, the struggle between reality and reputation, between truth and propaganda, between who we are and how history remembers us. Octavian won the war, but he did not completely control the story. Neither did Cleopatra. Instead, both left behind competing narratives. For 2,000 years, those narratives have battled for dominance. The result is the Cleopatra we know today. Part historical figure, part political symbol, part cultural icon, part mystery. And maybe that mystery is exactly why she remains immortal. Because mysteries invite curiosity. Mysteries encourage exploration. Mysteries survive where certainty ends. Somewhere beneath the sands of Egypt, or perhaps beneath the waters of Alexandria, the final secrets of Cleopatra may still wait. Perhaps future archaeologists will discover her tomb. Perhaps new evidence will emerge. Perhaps questions that have survived for centuries will finally receive answers. Or perhaps some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved. If so, Cleopatra would be in good company. History's greatest figures often leave behind unanswered questions, and few figures are greater than the last queen of Egypt. As we conclude this journey, we return to the question that started it all. What did Cleopatra really look like? The honest answer is that we may never know with complete certainty, but perhaps we have been asking the wrong question. Perhaps the more important question is this: what made Cleopatra unforgettable? The evidence suggests the answer was never simply her face. It was her mind, her ambition, her courage, her resilience, her ability to survive in a world determined to destroy her. That is the legacy that truly matters. And that is why, more than 2,000 years later, the Queen of the Nile still reigns over history, not as a ruler of Egypt, but as a ruler of memory. Fade to black. The waves continue rolling against the shore. The stars shine above Alexandria, the queen beneath the sands. As the centuries passed after Cleopatra's death, Egypt entered a new age. Roman banners flew above cities that had once answered only to pharaohs. Roman governors occupied positions once held by Egyptian nobles. Roman soldiers walked streets where Ptolemaic rulers had once been greeted as living gods. The transformation was immense. Yet something curious happened. Although Rome conquered Egypt, Egypt slowly conquered Rome in return. Not with armies, not with fleets, not with swords, but with culture. Egyptian art spread across the empire. Egyptian religion fascinated Roman citizens. Temples dedicated to Egyptian deities appeared far beyond the Nile. The worship of Isis expanded throughout the Mediterranean world. Obelisks were transported to distant cities. Egypt became fashionable. Egypt became mysterious. Egypt became legendary. And because Cleopatra represented Egypt itself in the Roman imagination, her legend grew alongside it. The woman who had once been portrayed as Rome's enemy gradually became one of history's most intriguing figures. The propaganda remained. The accusations remained. The stories remained. But time changed how people viewed them. Ancient political conflicts became historical curiosities. The emotions that fueled Roman hatred slowly faded. Future generations began examining Cleopatra from a different perspective, not as a threat, not as an enemy, but as a mystery. And mysteries have a unique power. They survive where ordinary stories disappear. The lost world of Alexandria. Today, when people imagine ancient Egypt, they often picture pyramids rising from the desert. They imagine tombs hidden beneath sand. They imagine pharaohs ruling from temples decorated with hieroglyphs. Yet, Cleopatra's Egypt was different. She belonged to a world connected to Greece, Rome, and the wider Mediterranean. Her capital was Alexandria, a city unlike any other. At its height, Alexandria rivaled the greatest urban centers on Earth. Its streets were crowded with merchants. Its harbor welcomed vessels from distant kingdoms. Its scholars pursued knowledge from every known civilization. Its library became a symbol of learning itself. Imagine walking through Alexandria during Cleopatra's reign. The smell of salt carried inland from the harbor. The sounds of merchants bargaining in multiple languages. The sight of magnificent palaces overlooking the sea. The towering lighthouse, visible for miles. The endless movement of people, animals, goods, and ideas. This was Cleopatra's world. A world of wealth. A world of opportunity. A world of ambition. Most of it is gone. Earthquakes damaged the coastline. Rising waters altered the landscape. Wars and time erased countless structures. Entire sections of the ancient city disappeared beneath the Mediterranean. The palaces where Cleopatra lived, the halls where she met ambassadors, the rooms where she planned military campaigns, many now rest beneath the sea, hidden from view, silent witnesses to history. When underwater archaeologists explore these submerged ruins, they often describe a strange feeling. Columns emerge from darkness. Statues appear unexpectedly from beneath layers of sediment. Broken monuments reveal fragments of forgotten stories. It is like discovering a ghost city, a city that once shaped the ancient world, a city connected forever to the woman whose name still captivates humanity. The search for immortality. Every ruler seeks legacy. Some build monuments. Some build empires. Some wage wars. Some create laws. All hope to be remembered. Yet history is unpredictable. Many rulers who believed themselves immortal disappeared from memory. Others achieved lasting fame for reasons they never anticipated. Cleopatra belongs firmly to the second category. Consider her situation. When she died in 30 BC, her kingdom vanished. Her dynasty ended. Her political ambitions failed. By conventional standards, she lost. Yet from the perspective of history, something remarkable happened. She became more famous than many conquerors, more famous than countless kings, more famous than rulers whose empires dwarfed her own. How? Because history is not merely about victory. It is about narrative. And Cleopatra's story contains everything people remember: power, romance, conflict, mystery, tragedy, ambition, loss. Few historical lives contain so many dramatic elements. The result is a story that feels almost fictional, yet it happened. That combination of fact and drama ensured her survival in human memory. The many faces of Cleopatra. One of the most fascinating aspects of Cleopatra's legacy is how often her image changes. Each generation creates a new Cleopatra. The Romans saw a dangerous foreign queen. Medieval writers often transformed her into a moral lesson. Renaissance artists portrayed her according to contemporary beauty standards. Victorian scholars interpreted her through the values of their era. Modern filmmakers reinvent her again and again. The process never ends. Every age projects its own hopes, fears, and expectations onto Cleopatra. As a result, there is no single Cleopatra in popular culture. There are many. The romantic Cleopatra, the political Cleopatra, the tragic Cleopatra, the feminist Cleopatra, the villainous Cleopatra, the heroic Cleopatra. Each reflects the concerns of the people telling the story. Yet beneath all these interpretations remains the historical figure herself, a woman who existed independent of the myths, a woman whose true life was probably more impressive than many of the legends. The lesson of propaganda. Perhaps one of the most important lessons from Cleopatra's story involves propaganda. Her life demonstrates how effectively narratives can shape historical memory. Octavian understood this better than almost anyone. He recognized that controlling the story could be as important as winning battles. By portraying Cleopatra as a dangerous seductress, he simplified a complex political conflict. Instead of discussing economic interests, military strategy, and competing visions of power, he offered a simpler explanation. A foreign queen had corrupted a Roman leader. The message was easy to understand, easy to repeat, easy to believe. And because Octavian ultimately became Augustus, the first Roman emperor, his version of events gained enormous influence. Future historians inherited many of his assumptions. Future generations absorbed many of his biases. The effects continue today. Even now, people often discuss Cleopatra's beauty before discussing her political achievements. That imbalance reflects the enduring power of ancient propaganda. It also serves as a reminder. History is rarely neutral. Historical sources have authors. Authors have motives, and motives shape narratives. Understanding Cleopatra requires looking beyond those narratives. It requires asking difficult questions. Who wrote the source? Why did they write it? What did they gain from presenting events in a particular way? These questions remain essential, not only for understanding Cleopatra, but for understanding history itself, the human being behind the legend. Perhaps the greatest challenge in studying Cleopatra is remembering that she was a real person. Legends can become so powerful that they obscure humanity. We speak of queens, empires, dynasties, battles, but behind those grand concepts stood an individual, a daughter, a mother, a ruler, a woman navigating extraordinary circumstances. She experienced fear, hope, ambition, loss, love, frustration, determination, the same emotions familiar to people today. Sometimes historical figures seem distant because of the centuries separating us from them. Yet human nature changes far less than technology. The hopes that motivated Cleopatra are recognizable. The challenges she faced are understandable. The choices she made, while shaped by her era, remain deeply human. This connection explains why her story continues resonating. People see fragments of themselves in her struggle, not because they rule kingdoms, because they understand perseverance. They understand uncertainty. They understand the desire to leave a meaningful legacy, a queen for the ages. As the night deepens over the Mediterranean, imagine Alexandria as it once was, the lighthouse blazing against darkness, ships entering the harbor, voices echoing through crowded streets, the royal palace illuminated by torchlight. Somewhere within that city walked Cleopatra, not yet a legend, not yet a symbol, simply a woman attempting to shape her future. She could not know that future generations would debate her appearance. She could not know archaeologists would search for her tomb. She could not know filmmakers would recreate her life. She could not know millions of people would continue speaking her name more than 2,000 years later. Yet somehow, despite the collapse of her kingdom and the destruction of her dynasty, she achieved something extraordinary. She escaped time. Most lives disappear into history. Cleopatra became history, and that is why her story endures. Not because every mystery has been solved, but because so many mysteries remain. The Queen of Egypt still waits. Somewhere beneath the sands, somewhere beneath the sea, somewhere between myth and reality.